The static broke through the radio just after midnight. I was half asleep on the couch when the screen lit up with the words, "Emergency Broadcast System." The voice that followed was flat, mechanical, but urgent. "This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test." I rubbed my eyes and leaned closer. The voice crackled through the speakers again. "Do not look at the sky. Do not acknowledge anything unusual above you. Remain indoors." At first, I laughed under my breath. It sounded like some bizarre hoax. Warnings about the sky. But then I heard sirens outside. They weren't stopping. I pulled the curtain back just an inch. The street was empty. No cars. No neighbors. Only the distant wail of alarms rolling through the night. The sky looked wrong. The stars seemed brighter than usual, but not in a natural way. They pulsed like tiny eyes blinking in unison. I let the curtain drop and stepped back. The voice repeated on the radio. "Do not trust what you see. Do not look again. Failure to comply will result in immediate compromise." Compromise. That word stuck in my head. What did it mean? Was it code? Was something in the sky? A knock came at the door. 3 sharp taps. Then silence. When I froze, the voice outside whispered my name. It sounded like my neighbor, Mrs. Holloway. But she'd been gone for weeks. I saw the moving truck myself. Still, the voice called again, soft, desperate. "Please come look. It's beautiful." I stumbled back from the door, heart hammering. The voice outside grew more insistent. Each word seemed to echo, like it was being carried down from above. The radio blared again, louder this time. "Do not engage with voices outside. They are not human. Do not look at the sky." I turned the volume down, but the warning didn't stop. It wasn't just on my radio anymore. Every device in the house, my phone, my laptop, even the old landline, buzzed with the same repeating message. Then silence. Every screen went black. For a moment, the whole world felt dead. But outside, the knocking returned. This time, it wasn't just one knock. Every window, every wall, every door. Tiny taps in perfect rhythm, like rain. But the sky was clear. I clamped my hands over my ears. The tapping didn't stop. Instead, it formed words. Not with sound, with rhythm. They were spelling, "Look up." The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then a hum filled the house, low and vibrating, like the air itself was shaking. Against my will, my feet moved toward the window. I tried to resist, but some invisible pull dragged me closer. The urge to look up was unbearable. I pressed my forehead against the glass. But I didn't look up. I stared at the street instead. Empty. Silent. Waiting. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The stars weren't where they had been. They were shifting, spiraling slowly, like something vast was crawling behind the sky. I tore myself from the window, my body shaking. Whatever was happening above, I couldn't look. The warning repeated in my mind like a prayer. I grabbed a blanket and shoved it over the glass. If I couldn't see it, maybe it couldn't see me. The room dimmed, but the pressure in the air didn't fade. The radio sparked alive again. This time, the voice sounded strained, almost like it was struggling to keep its words straight. "If you have seen the sky, cover all reflective surfaces." Reflective surfaces. I stared at the dark screen of my TV. My own reflection grinned back at me, though my mouth was closed. I threw the blanket over it too, then rushed to the kitchen. Knives. Windows. Even the microwave. Everywhere I looked, my reflection seemed delayed. It blinked after I did. It breathed slower. And once, just once, it looked upward even when I didn't. I smashed the microwave with my hammer. The glass cracked, spilling sparks across the counter. But for a split second before it died, my reflection's eyes rolled white. The knock at the door grew violent. Wood rattled in its frame, but the voice outside never raised above a whisper. "Please. It's so beautiful. Just one glance." The blanket over the window trembled. Something pressed against it from outside, shaping an outline. Not a hand. Not a face. Something wider. Something bending. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. My phone lit up on the table, though I'd turned it off hours ago. On the screen was a single message: "Look up." The letters burned into the display, warping and twisting until they formed a spiral. The longer I stared, the more I felt my neck tilt toward the ceiling. I slammed the phone face down. When I did, the tapping stopped. The silence felt worse, as if everything outside was holding its breath. Then, faintly, a low rumble rolled across the sky. It wasn't thunder. It was too steady, too alive. The kind of sound you feel in your ribs. The walls of the house trembled. My picture frames rattled. Every dish in the cabinet buzzed against the next. The air itself felt stretched thin. The broadcast returned. The voice sounded wrong now, as if it were underwater. "Do not trust the sky. Do not trust the ground." The ground? I dropped to my knees, pressing my palms against the hardwood. It pulsed, like a slow heartbeat. I yanked my hands back, horrified. The heartbeat grew louder. Not beneath me, but above. From the ceiling. From the roof. Someone was walking on top of the house. Each step heavy, measured. Too large for a human. Too slow for an animal. Dust trickled down from the rafters. The lights flickered again. And in the brief darkness, I swore I saw the ceiling bow inward, as if something enormous was pressing down. The footsteps stopped. And then, in a voice that shook the walls, the thing above whispered, "Why won't you look at me?" I backed into the kitchen, clutching the counter for balance. The voice from above still echoed in my chest, deep and vibrating like the sky itself had leaned down to speak. Every instinct screamed at me to hide, but there was nowhere safe. The air felt alive, watching, listening. When I reached for a glass of water, my reflection in the cupboard window didn't move. It stood perfectly still, its eyes fixed upward at something I dared not see. I grabbed a towel and threw it over the glass, but the reflection lingered for a moment longer before dissolving into nothing. My hands shook violently, and I realized that covering the windows wasn't enough anymore. The presence outside was bleeding in, bending the world inside my house. I thought about the neighbors, about Mrs. Holloway's voice at my door. Was she even human anymore, or just another echo of what was crawling in the sky? A distant scream carried through the night, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't the kind of scream that faded with distance. It stretched, high and unbroken, echoing across every street like it came from the air itself. I stumbled to the living room, pulling the blankets tighter against the windows. For a moment I thought I was safe. But then the radio snapped on again, louder than before, the static tearing at my ears until I almost collapsed. "This is not a test," the voice droned, but it no longer sounded human. The syllables bent and warped, as if multiple mouths were speaking at once. "Do not look up. Do not leave your home. If you have already looked," the voice paused, and the silence was unbearable. When it returned, it was lower, harsher. "You are no longer yourself." My stomach dropped, while rising in my throat. Outside, the knocking at the door stopped entirely. That silence was worse than any noise. The voices that had called my name, the rhythmic tapping that urged me to look up, gone. The stillness pressed on me until my ears rang. I inched closer to the door, not daring to touch it, but needing to know. My breath fogged against the wood as I leaned in, listening. For a moment, there was nothing. Then softly, directly on the other side, a perfect copy of my voice whispered, "Look." I leapt back, slamming into the wall. The thing outside laughed softly, and the sound wasn't my laugh. It was hollow, endless, like it came from a tunnel stretching into the stars. The ceiling creaked overhead again. I felt eyes on me, not from the door, but from above. Every nerve screamed at me to look up, to see what pressed down on my house. My neck strained, and it took every ounce of willpower to force my gaze away. The floorboards vibrated beneath my feet as the sound of footsteps returned. This time, they weren't just above, they circled the house, heavy and deliberate. Each step shook dust loose from the rafters, until my living room was filled with a haze that glowed faintly in the flickering light. My chest tightened as I realized the dust wasn't just falling. It was floating upward, drawn to the ceiling as if gravity itself had begun to bend. I ran to the hallway, choking on the shimmering haze. Every light bulb buzzed like angry bees, growing hotter until they popped one by one, plunging the house into stuttering darkness. In the black flashes between flickers, I saw things, shadows stretching unnaturally tall, pressed flat against the walls, sliding along like stains of night. They didn't match my movements. They didn't belong to me. And worse, some of them were tilting their heads upward, staring through the roof. My knees buckled as the emergency broadcast filled the air again, not from the radio, but from everywhere. The pipes groaned with it. The vents carried it. The walls hummed like speakers. Remain calm. Shelter in place. Do not trust the sky. Do not trust what it shows you. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voice was inside my skull now, rattling against my bones, worming into the parts of me that still wanted to look. Through the flicker of broken lights, I caught movement near the back door. My reflection in the sliding glass hadn't been covered. It was standing there, rigid, hands pressed against the glass, its face tilted straight upward. As I watched, its mouth opened wide, wider than humanly possible, splitting its jaw as if trying to swallow the ceiling. The reflection's chest heaved, inhaling something I couldn't see, and for a heartbeat, my lungs stopped working too. I yanked the curtains across the glass, stumbling backward as my breath came rushing back in ragged gasps. My vision swam. My heart pounded. And then came the sound I dreaded most, laughter. Not from outside. Not from above. From within the house itself. It bounced off the walls, a chorus of voices layered together, some sounding like mine, some like strangers, and some like the voice from the emergency broadcast itself. They were laughing at me. I grabbed the hammer from the counter again, holding it out like a weapon, though I knew it was useless. The laughter stopped instantly, as if amused by my defiance. Then whispering, 100 hushed voices all at once, crawling across the walls and floor. They didn't chant or speak in rhythm. Instead, they all repeated one word. Up. My hand trembled around the hammer's handle, sweat dripping down my forehead. If I listened too long, I'd obey. I bolted into the bedroom and slammed the door behind me, jamming a chair under the knob. My chest heaved, but the whispers seeped through the cracks. I tore the sheets from my bed and shoved them against the window, desperate to block every angle. But when I turned toward the mirror on the dresser, my reflection wasn't there. The glass was black, empty, as though it were a window into some other void. I couldn't look away. The mirror quivered like ripples on water, and then something surfaced within it. A face. My face. But its eyes were glowing with faint, starlit light. It smiled slow and wide, and then began to raise its finger, pointing upward. My throat closed as I staggered back. I threw the dresser onto its side, shattering the mirror into 100 pieces. But the shards scattered across the floor all reflected the same image, me pointing to the ceiling. I dropped the hammer and pressed my palms to my head, shaking, desperate to block it all out. That's when the broadcast voice returned one last time, so loud it rattled the furniture. If you are hearing this, remain silent. They are listening. They are watching. Do not look up. The walls groaned as the voice faded, and in its place came a deep, drawn-out breath. Not mine. Not human. A breath that seemed to come from the roof itself. The house shuddered, a sound like branches scraping across the siding. But I knew there were no trees near my house. Shadows bled across the walls, long and spindly, stretching down the hallway toward my barricaded door. Each one moved with agonizing slowness, bending at impossible angles. When the largest shadow reached the door, the wood bowed inward. I braced against it with my shoulder, sweat pouring down my face. It wanted in, or maybe it already was. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure lifted. The air grew still. The shadows retreated. For the first time since the alert, the house was silent. I slumped to the floor, my entire body trembling. Had it given up? Had it moved on to someone else? My chest heaved with shaky relief. But then, from outside, I heard the distant sound of voices, hundreds of them, chanting in perfect unison. Their single word echoed into the night. Up. I crawled to the window and carefully peeled back the corner of the blanket, just enough to peek. I kept my eyes fixed low, scanning the empty street. But the street wasn't empty anymore. People stood motionless in perfect rows, their faces tilted toward the sky. I recognized neighbors, strangers, even children. Their bodies didn't sway, didn't move. They simply stared upward, their mouths open, inhaling something unseen. My stomach turned as I realized none of them were breathing out. I slammed the blanket shut and staggered back. My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs would snap. I wasn't safe. The whole town had already seen it. They weren't people anymore. They were something else, drawn upward like moths to a flame. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand, though it was dead. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. The screen glowed with a new alert. Remain inside. The sky is listening. I dropped the phone, my hand burning as though the words themselves had seared my skin. The silence outside returned, heavy and suffocating. Then, faintly, from beyond the blankets covering my window, I heard something tapping the glass. Slow, careful, rhythmic. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. I inched closer, every nerve screaming. Just as I reached for the curtain, a voice hissed through the window. My own voice again. Why resist it? I stumbled back from the window, clutching my ears as the voice echoed in my skull. It wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was blooming inside my mind, curling like smoke through every thought. Why resist it? It repeated, soft but relentless. My knees buckled and I hit the floor. The house groaned again, the ceiling flexing as if something massive pressed down on it. The air grew heavy. My lungs felt too small. I couldn't keep this up. I crawled to the closet, throwing myself inside and shutting the door. In the suffocating dark, I curled into a ball and pressed my face against my knees. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, but beneath it, I heard something else, footsteps. Not outside. Inside the closet. My blood turned cold as I realized the sound wasn't mine. The floorboards creaked under invisible weight. When I lifted my head, the darkness before me split into a glowing smile. I slammed my eyes shut, whispering over and over that it wasn't real. My fingernails dug into my palms until I felt blood. The glowing smile lingered in my vision, imprinted like an afterimage. Then silence. When I finally opened my eyes, the closet was empty again. My chest heaved, relief washing over me, until I noticed the clothes hanging from the rod. Every shirt, every jacket was tilted upward, as though invisible heads were staring through the ceiling. I bolted from the closet, slamming the door behind me. The whispering returned instantly, slithering across the walls and floor. Up, up, up. My ears rang with the pressure of it. I stumbled down the hallway, gripping the hammer again, though I knew it wouldn't matter. The voices wanted obedience. They wanted my eyes. My hand trembled as I reached the end of the hall, where the attic door loomed above me. Its hinges creaked as it began to open. A draft of air rushed down from the attic, colder than ice, carrying with it the faint scent of ozone, like lightning had struck just above. Dust spiraled in the air, glowing faintly with starlight. I slammed the attic hatch shut and locked it, but the whispers grew louder, vibrating the door against its frame. The ceiling trembled. My heart pounded so hard I nearly collapsed. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave the house, even if it killed me. I crept to the front door, every muscle tense, every nerve screaming. Through the cracks in the blinds, I could see them still, dozens of figures on the street, heads tilted back, staring upward without blinking. Their mouths opened wider than any human jaw should, inhaling endlessly. I held my breath and turned the lock as slowly as I could. But before I could open it, the door vibrated beneath my hand. A voice, low and guttural, whispered, "Don't." I froze, my forehead pressed against the cool wood. That whisper hadn't come from outside. It had come from the door itself. The grain of the wood shifted beneath my fingertips, pulsing faintly like veins beneath skin. My stomach lurched as I stumbled back. The door expanded, stretching taller, wider, until it towered above me. The knob twisted on its own, metal groaning. With a slow creak, the door opened outward, not to the street, but to the sky. It wasn't the night sky I knew. This was wrong. A vast expanse of shifting colors rippled like water, shapes swimming in its depths. Some resembled stars, but they moved too quickly, too purposefully. My throat closed as I saw one shape press closer, its outline too massive to comprehend, bending the horizon with its size. The figures outside fell to their knees in perfect unison, arms outstretched to the shimmering void. My legs trembled as I backed away. The door slammed shut on its own, rattling the frame. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. The silence afterward was suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of the emergency broadcast. But it no longer repeated warnings. It was singing, a low, droning melody with no words, vibrating through every wall. My skin prickled with goose bumps as the melody rose in pitch, resonating with something deep inside me. My teeth ached. My bones vibrated. I stumbled to the bathroom and turned on the faucet, desperate for noise to drown out the sound. But no water came. Instead, static hissed from the tap, the same static that had plagued the radios. It grew louder until the mirror above the sink fogged over, though the air was ice cold. Slowly, words began to carve into the glass, as though written by an unseen finger. "You have already looked." My heart stopped. I had never looked up. The words bled away, replaced by a distorted reflection of myself. Its eyes glowed faintly, just as in the shattered mirror before. But this time, it didn't point upward. It smiled. Slowly, methodically, it raised a hand and pressed its palm against the glass. Against my will, my own hand lifted, pressing against the mirror in perfect unison. The cold seeped through my skin, and for an instant, I couldn't tell which reflection was truly mine. I ripped my hand away and stumbled out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind me. The whispering grew louder, angrier, as though I had defied something ancient. The ceiling above me groaned again, the beams bending under invisible weight. Dust rained down, glittering with unnatural light. My vision swam, nausea twisting in my gut. I realized with a sick certainty that I hadn't needed to look at the sky. The sky had already found its way inside. The emergency alert returned, louder than ever, blasting from every surface in the house. Do not trust your eyes. Do not trust the sky. If you are hearing this, it is already too late. My stomach dropped as the words sank in. Too late. The voices weren't trying to lure me into looking, they were mocking me. My resistance had meant nothing. I stumbled to the living room, clutching my head, as the shadows began seeping from the ceiling. They poured downward like black ink, dripping in long tendrils that coiled along the floor. Some took shape, arms, legs, faces twisted in silent screams. They writhed across the carpet, reaching for me. My back hit the wall as I raised the hammer, swinging wildly, though it passed straight through. The shadows didn't flinch. They only grew, stretching taller, until their heads nearly touched the ceiling. Every one of them was staring upward, basking in the unseen light. The chanting outside grew louder, synchronized with the movements of the shadows inside. My vision blurred as my body swayed against the wall. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere left to go. I sank to my knees, hammer slipping from my hand. The whispering, the chanting, the static, they all blended into one unbearable drone. And through it all, a single thought, not my own, wormed into my mind. Look. I pressed my palms against my eyes, digging hard enough to see sparks behind my eyelids. Tears burned down my cheeks. The pressure around me intensified, pressing into my skull like a vice. My head throbbed with a rhythm I couldn't escape, pulsing in perfect time with the chant outside. Up, up, up. My body trembled, every muscle failing me. I knew I couldn't hold out much longer. The urge to obey clawed at me like hunger. Somewhere in the distance, a scream ripped through the air, breaking the rhythm. It wasn't the endless scream I'd heard before. This one was human. Desperate. Alive. My eyes snapped open as I realized it came from the house next door. Someone else had resisted. Someone else was still fighting. I staggered to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see. A figure thrashed in the street, dragged upward by invisible strings, screaming as their body rose. They kicked and fought, their head tilting back against their will. Their scream cut short as their mouth opened impossibly wide, inhaling the shimmering sky. Their body went limp, suspended for a heartbeat before collapsing back onto the ground. But when they stood, their movements were wrong. Jerky, puppet-like. Their head remained tilted back, eyes fixed on the heavens. My stomach turned as they joined the rows of neighbors, still staring upward, still inhaling endlessly. I dropped the curtain, shaking violently. There was no hope. Resistance only delayed the inevitable. I stumbled toward the basement door, praying the underground would shield me. But when I yanked it open, a gust of freezing air slammed into me. At the bottom of the stairs was no basement, only sky. A vast expanse of stars and colors stretched into eternity, shifting and pulsing like a living thing. My knees buckled as the voices inside my head roared. Look. I slammed the basement door shut and collapsed against it, sobbing. My body ached, my mind frayed. Every escape led back to the same nightmare. The house wasn't shelter anymore. It was a funnel, a cage pushing me toward the inevitable. Outside, the chanting swelled, shaking the walls. Inside, the shadows closed in, their arms stretching toward me. Above, the ceiling cracked with the weight of something pressing down. I was surrounded, and I couldn't resist forever. The house shuddered violently, dust raining from the ceiling. The whispering became a roar, shaking my skull. My hands trembled as the urge to look upward burned like fire inside me. The shadows pressed closer, their mouths open in silent screams. Their black arms stretched toward me, but instead of grabbing, they pointed straight up, commanding, demanding obedience. I buried my face in my arms, sobbing. No, I whispered. My voice broke, drowned beneath the chanting outside. The walls groaned, as if the sky itself leaned against my fragile shelter. The radio sparked to life one last time, voice warped and broken. Final warning. Do not trust what you see. If you have already looked, you are no longer one of us. My breath caught. A crack split the ceiling above, revealing a thin streak of light. It pulsed like a heartbeat, leaking colors I couldn't name. The shadows bowed before it. I pressed my palms harder against my eyes, but the light still burned through, searing into my vision. My head pounded. Every thought blurred into a single word. Look. The crack widened. The ceiling peeled away like fragile paper, exposing a sky too vast, too alive. Stars twisted and swam like eyes. Shapes coiled in the endless void. The neighbors outside fell flat to the ground, arms spread, as if welcoming something descending. Their voices merged into a single, unearthly hymn. The sound rattled my bones. My body lifted from the floor, weightless. Invisible hands pulled me upward. I kicked, screamed, but it didn't matter. The sky wanted me. My resistance was breaking. The emergency alert returned, now almost pleading. Do not look. Do not look. Do not. The words cut off in static as the ceiling burst wide, flooding the room in color. I couldn't help it. My eyes opened. The sky filled me, overwhelming, infinite. The stars weren't stars. They were mouths, rows of teeth grinning across eternity. My scream died in my throat. Something vast reached down, threading itself into my chest, stitching me into its endless tapestry. My body convulsed. My mind dissolved. I saw my neighbors clearly now. They weren't people anymore. They were extensions, limbs of something greater. And I had joined them. The realization crushed what was left of me. My shadow rose from the ground, stretching tall, tall enough to touch the sky. It merged upward into the swirling void, tethering me to something I couldn't escape. The voice inside me shifted. It no longer commanded. It welcomed. You belong. The words weren't spoken, but carved into my soul. I stopped fighting. My body went still. The hymn outside quieted. The neighbors stood silently, their eyes glowing faintly, their mouths open to the endless sky. I mirrored them perfectly. I was one of them. The emergency broadcast crackled one last time. Humanity has been compromised. Repeat, humanity has been compromised. Do not trust the sky. The signal cut. Silence fell. The world was no longer mine. The streets, the homes, every living thing was a vessel turned skyward. The sky breathed through us. We were its eyes, its voices, its hunger. I felt the pull intensify, dragging me upward into the shimmering void. My body lifted, dissolving into light. There was no pain, Only surrender, only merging. As my vision blurred into stars and color, my last thought wasn't my own. It was the sky's, a whisper echoing into eternity. Do not trust the sky.